Welcome back. I am joined again with Nate to talk about Bojan Bogdanovic potentially buyout and what's the best option for the Brooklyn Nets regarding his $19 million contract, roughly. He was brought back to Brooklyn in the Bridges trade as the lone player in the trade for the most part. Nate, first, your thoughts on Bogdanovic? What's left with him as the player, and how do you assess his $19 million contract?
I mean, I've always liked it. First of all, hello Gary. Good to see you
It's
again.
good to see you, Nate.
Thanks
Nate's a
for
little
having me
busy,
on.
so I'm trying to keep
No,
this
we'll
moving.
get right to it. I'm coming to you from live in Central Parks where we're reporting from today. Bogdanovic. I mean, I've always liked the player, even when he was with his original stint with the Nets. He's obviously an older guy that's lost a step, if he even had a step in his game. He's always kind of been what he is. He has in his career become a guy that can score and create space at an NBA level. Like people put the tag on him like he's just a 3-point shooter. Like he's actually, he's not Cam Johnson. He's a guy that can score, and a lot of the nights for the Pistons was their go-to scorer. Granted, he was a go-to scorer for the Pistons, but still on an NBA level, like the guy can get buckets, and the guy can really shoot. He's coming off an injury, so he's lost some value there. He's a great playoff series or two away. Like if he had a great playoff series with the Knicks and was really like, a real asset to helping them win, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now at all. If the injury didn't happen and he didn't basically not play and not perform at all in the playoffs, I don't think we're having this conversation. It's also a tough look. Like we've argued about the Nets and Mikal Bridges trade. If the only asset you're getting is you end up buying out before he even plays a game, it's kind of like what the Nets, or when they traded Mama Diakite and just for the buyout with when the Grizzlies needed money. It's like this is a player that probably has more value than that. Like whether it's yeah, I don't know. But if he performs well in the first half, he's obviously going to have value. And a guy like Zaire, who the Nets traded for, is a guy you hope to have value. But like Bogdanovic, he already has value at an NBA level. So I like the player. I don't love the buyout idea. Just what does it do for the Nets besides create roster space and some money, which do they need either of right now?
Well, let me address that. So there's two things. They obviously have a bunch of guys, Zaire, Jalen Wilson, guys that are going to play that 3 position that they want to give minutes to.
Mm-hmm.
$19.5 million. I don't know if they could buy him out for 16 and they save $3.5 million. That would give them extra money in case someone wants to dump a salary that would bring the Nets a future pick. I'm not saying it's the best value, but it's going to be hard to trade his $19 million contract for a matching contract and a pick. If they buy him out and they save a little money, it'll allow them to make a potential future trade, where they can take on a bad contract in exchange for a pick, which I would think is the reasoning. Does Bogdanovic, to a good team, he played 29 games last year for the Knicks. He played okay, right? He's a quality scorer. Well, 2 questions.
He was a better person than a Knick for sure last year.
Does he have much value to a good team? And well, let's start with that. I mean, and if he plays last year in the playoffs, do the Knicks beat the Pacers?
That's a good question regarding the Pacers. I mean, there's a chance he could definitely help win 1 or 2 games with his ability to score I want to say off the bench, but at that point with all the injuries they had, he'd probably be starting, to be honest, possibly in Dante's role. But so yeah, that's an interesting question. It's definitely a cost up, and he's probably the X factor that would or one of the X factors to decide like if they get through, just like DiVincenzo and those guys are the X factor in their first series against the 76ers. Remind me, what was your first question?
How much value does a playoff team, a competitive team, how much value does he offer to a team like that?
He's going to offer more value probably at the trade deadline. Just like he's going to be an expiring contract. So as much as we're saying that we can acquire, a bad contract. There's going to be teams that are looking to acquire, his contract that can shoot the ball. As we know, it's like we see it in the NFL, you see it in the NBA. Injuries happen, rotations change. You end up needing a shooter or I don't want to say a 3-and-D guy, but a guy that can really, score the ball, so to speak. So what the Knicks get? They got Quentin. I think they get Quentin Grimes and a couple seconds. I want to say was his value last year. I don't think it was a first-round pick from the Knicks, but
no, there was no first-round pick involved.
They got a young asset, so to speak, in Grimes, like a young 3-and-D player who obviously the Pistons coveted over an old expiring Bogdanovic for where they were. So it's possible you get a first out of him, but like you said, it takes away from the Zaire's and the young question marks that the Nets are trying to find out about this year.
Malachi Flynn came over in that trade too, but then yeah,
he seems like he's just a throw-in NBA player. But although he had a
50-point night. 50. He dropped a 50 ball.
Yeah. That was...
50 balls ain't what they used to be. Yeah, I remember as a kid still watching Steph Marbury scored 50 against the Lakers. I still remember watching that game. I was about 18, 17 years old at that time. And it was like, it was a big deal. Now Malachi drops 50. Like Malachi Flynn drops 50. 50 balls ain't what they used to be.
The last ever Knicks game I've been to live was when Carmelo Anthony scored 62 points. And it always comes up in my Facebook memories and whatnot. It was my uncle's birthday, and he was like, "Yeah, I want to go to a Knicks game." So we went, and I just remember the buzz. Like it was like I asked my dad, I was like, "Was this what it was like in the '90s in the Garden?" I remember the buzz in the arena.
Yeah.
Halftime, he made that long half court shot, and nobody left their seat. Everybody goes to get beers and beverages, whatever, at halftime. Nobody moved because they wanted to see his warm-ups, whether he was going to knock down, his jumpers warming up for the third quarter. And there was a buzz, every time he got the ball. And it was a fun environment. That was my last game.
I wanted to get back to that Bogdanovic. Like I said, he got traded for a pretty good role-playing prospect, right? I mean, you don't expect I'm losing my brain. Quentin Grimes to be a star, but he is a guy that can contribute. He contributed for the Knicks, who were a good team prior to the trade, and then second rounders.
Yep.
Do you think the Nets could kind of bring in that same kind of value at the deadline next year, or is it less than that due to the injury?
Hold on a second. Say it one more time, Gary. I'm sorry.
Due to the injury, do you think he could bring in that same kind of value again this year, where the Nets can get a younger role player and some twos, or has his value declined more than that because of his injury?
I mean, like I said last podcast, beautiful thing about live sports is we had to find out this year, and like the Nets had to put their gamble just like the Knicks did with Deuce McBride. They thought they had a good player. Like if you think he has value this year, then I would say yes. And I'm a guy that like Quentin Grimes. Like Quentin Grimes is like a good, like he's athletic. He can really shoot the ball. His playmaking leaves a lot to be desired, but for a young like 3-and-D guy, this guy that's real. I think they just kind of thought Deuce McBride was better in that role, or they would have kept Quentin Grimes. I don't think they.
Well, they at least had a replacement, right? Like he could at least replace him. Was the thought, right?
Yeah. No, exactly, and probably a better because Quentin Grimes can handle the ball and be that backup point guard and guard the best guards in the league on ball. So, but as long as his injury comes back, he didn't tear his Achilles, I don't think. So as long as he is able to come back but it all depends if the Nets have him in his plans. Like you don't want to waste him on the bench, obviously. If that's the case, then like you said, if they can buy him out for cheap, if their plan and the coach Fernandez only doesn't have minutes for him, then bench him. But if you have a role for him, then you got to go with it.
Bogdanovic averaged over the last 5 years, that's from 2018-19 to the 2022-2023 season, averaged, to take away last year, averaged 18.8 points a game on 46-40 shooting splits. That's super efficient. So he could still score. He's still a good offensive player. And
for sure.
Some of that was done with Indiana and Utah, so decent teams. It wasn't, stat compiling on the Pistons. He averaged 20, 18, and 20 with Utah, which tells me that he should still be able to be productive. Is that something that the Nets want? I mean, I'm one that thinks you can't have zero vets on your team. He played a similar role with Detroit that he would play with the Nets this year. He was fine with the role. He didn't demand a trade. He didn't, give no effort. Is he kind of still a good fit for the, I mean, he's not going to win you a bunch of games, so he's not going to take you out of the Cooper Flag or Ace Bailey sweepstakes by himself. Is he a good fit for the Nets, and should the Nets just look to keep him?
I personally think he's a good fit. Like we've talked about Cam Thomas, right? If you don't have Bojan Bogdanovic, Cam Thomas is definitely shooting 40 shots a game. You need someone to score the basketball when Cam Thomas is not able to score 30 points a game. I still think there's a role. Like, again, I don't know his rehab process. I don't know what if they don't think he's going to be back, fully healthy or what's the case. But if he's the Bogdanovic we saw last year with Detroit and we saw with Utah or years before that, then that's a piece you want, even if he is off the bench. Like him against second units in the NBA, he's still going to be able to score and score efficiently, which is going to turn into a draft pick, or if you want a young player, it's going to turn into an asset for the Nets for sure.
Is there a team that would take on that $19 million contract if they could dump off another contract? Like, could the Nets swap him for another Lonzo Ball type contract? Because those contracts, I mean, he wouldn't make much sense to Chicago. But is there a contract like that out there that may work where the Nets could swap him? Or is it something that they would have to eat most of the contract if they wanted to trade him?
I'd have to look at expiring deals and kind of what the cap situations. I wouldn't say no to that at all. I mean, like I said, he's expiring $19 million that we assume can still score the ball at an NBA level. So I don't. That's usually an asset at the trade deadline. I don't think he's. I don't know. There's definitely worse contracts and worse deals out there. I think as long as he's healthy, then they'll be able to move him at the deadline. At the deadline.
Yeah, kind of my take on him is I think he has value to the Nets. Like I want some vets on the team. I think he makes sense. Like I said, he can still score the ball, and he's not going to, like he showed last year with Detroit, he's not going to single-handedly win you games. They started like 0-20, right? So he's a good piece to have. He's another guy on your team that can score, which the Nets are desperate for. If they can't get a real attractive young player like a Quentin Grimes or a first, in my opinion, I would just keep him. I would, like, unless something really, really sexy comes along, like a really sexy offer comes along for him, I wouldn't, push to move. Like, I want to move Cam Johnson. I want to move DFS. Bogdanovic, just kind of keep him. Like, it's an expiring deal. He's played in this role before. He offers you something that you need. He's not going to single-handed win you games to get you out of the Cooper Flag, Ace Bailey sweepstakes. I'm kind of more on the idea of keeping him and Schroeder. I don't think that would be the end of the world. I mean, do you think there's a realistic possibility that he's on the Nets throughout the season, or at least to the deadline?
I'm on the same page with you. I think that the team needs vets. You can't just go in there with 15 young guys. And Bogdanovic, like I just said, like you mentioned, you compared earlier to the guys you're going to be competing with playing times, Zaire Williams and Jalen Wilson. These are not like, if they end up being Bogdanovic type scorers, you'd be happily shocked, but you're not expecting that from them. So there's going to be plenty of nights where us as Nets fans are going to be rooting for a win, and Bogdanovic is going to be a big part of that. And as of right now, it's like you can't put that on a young guy like Zaire or Wilson at all to have those type of expectations to impact winning, even if it is in the regular season. So I think there's a role for both of them on the team. I think you said you wanted to start Schroeder when we went over our starting five. That's definitely still a possibility, even if it's with Cam. But yeah, you want to have veterans. Like, they're trying to create this Nets culture again, so to speak. Like, you want guys to be able to show them how it's done. Not the coach just dictating how it's done.
I appreciate your time, Nate. I have one last question for you. I'm not sure if you're totally familiar with it, but I watched some tape on. The Nets gave an Exhibit 10 contract to Amari Bailey out of UCLA, who played for the Charlotte Hornets last year. I'm really impressed with his tape. He only played a handful of games, I think 10 games last year. Are you familiar with him at all? And what are your thoughts on Amari Bailey?
I am not familiar with him. I had to look up if it was Ace Bailey's cousin. If they were
no relation.
If
But
they're
his
trying
mom did have a fling with Drake and John Morant.
Yeah, they might be making a recruiting move, getting a family member of Ace. The only thing I learned about him, I'd just be regurgitating your takes of when you had a video about him on your channel about him. I have to look more into him. I don't want to. I can't make up anything now. I just, like I said, I'd be regurgitating what I heard on your channel about him.
Yeah, I didn't know much about him. I said he only played 10 games. He played 1 year at UCLA. I watched the tape. He seems like a super athlete. It's someone I want on the roster, and I want getting some minutes. But we'll see. I appreciate your time, Nate. I appreciate your take on Bogdanovic. I think we kind of agree on that. So I'll give you any last final words on that.
No, for sure. I want them to keep assets. They're not a team with asset rich that they can just buy someone out and and hope they can make a good move at the deadline with some money. I'd rather keep them and turn it into a young asset or a draft pick. So I think we are for once on the same page about that.
Appreciate your time, Nate. Thanks for hopping on.
See you next time.
See you next time.